Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hamilton Report. I'm Scott J. Hamilton, your host, and I'm very happy that you decided to spend a bit of time with us this evening. Today's the 24th day of January, which means we're moving closer to November elections all the time. And there's so much, though, that's happening between now and election time that it's hard to keep track of everything. So that's why on this broadcast, as well as on the Chair's Daily Live every day at 4:15, we will continue to bring you news that is critical for all Oklahomans to be paying attention to. And tonight we are going to take a hard look at something that I think should be troubling to every single person in this state, and that is the way that Republican legislators are truly attacking our educational system. It is frightening to me to see some of these bills and to think about the outcomes that they will likely produce for our children and our grandchildren. So with that, I am no subject matter expert here, but that's why I'm always happy to welcome guests to this broadcast, people who know more about a topic than I do. And I'd like to start this evening with Carol Aseo. Carol is a retired, I use that term very loosely because I know how very busy she is doing volunteer work, but she's a retired classroom teacher as well as a school administrator. Carol, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here tonight.
And also welcoming Veronica Jones, who is a resource teacher in the Oklahoma City Public Schools. And I'll let her tell you a little bit more about what that job entails. But Veronica, thank you for being able to join us this evening.
Oh, thank you, Scott, for inviting me. I'm excited to be able to talk to everyone about what's going on.
Do me a favor, if you would, Veronica, tell us what a resource teacher is.
Well, I am a bilingual resource teacher, and so I assist the classroom teachers with students who have more than one language. And as a resource teacher, I had to be certified in other areas as well as my certification in teaching. I have an ESL certification along with my early childhood certification. And as a resource teacher, not only do I have to go to school to become certified, but we are also trained in several different areas: how to teach children, how to read, how to teach children, how to listen, speak, and writing. So we specialize in certain areas to help these children, especially struggling students.
Wow, that's a pretty monumental task. And just hearing you describe in a couple of sentences what's involved in your work makes me appreciate you even more because um, that's certainly a resource that we need in Oklahoma right now. Carol,
Yes.
tell me, you've been looking at a lot of these bills. I know because you're great in research. You are driven by data, and I'd like for you to talk just generally about the landscape of what you're seeing in some of these proposed bills regarding education in Oklahoma.
A couple of the bills that I've been watching have to do with firearms in the school. They're trying to lessen the training for any staff member to carry a firearm. They're trying to do away with the gun-free school zones, which was enacted several years ago, and say that won't be in Oklahoma. It won't be a gun-free school zone anymore. And there's also last year watching House Bill 1775, which is on first blush when you read it, it's the prohibition of race and sex discrimination. But essentially what it is trying to get the CRT, um, anything that would look like we were helping kids understand them, anything that a counselor might talk to a student who was concerned about gender identity or anything like that, we wouldn't be able to do that anymore.
And that's, when you read Dear Abby, for example, one of the very first pieces of advice that she gives to a young person is talk to a trusted teacher or counselor. And if we're making those teachers and counselors, um, actually criminals, according to this
Yes.
law, that's not much of a positive thing for our kids. You mentioned CRT a moment ago, and I want to be very clear to our viewers. Critical race theory is not something that's taught
It's
in
not
grade
at all.
school or middle school or high school. It is honestly, it's rarely found. It is a law school class. Some master's programs also feature this class, and it has nothing to do with our K through 12 education. But they've made this the big boogeyman. And it's so funny to me how if you put initials around something, then it becomes this great monster. It's not a
Mhm.
problem that we've had in Oklahoma. And this ill, this stupid piece of legislation, honestly, is that that's exactly what it is. It's wrongheaded. It's a solution in search of a problem that does not exist.
Mhm.
But through that, we wind up with a whole lot more that waters down education. Veronica, in the time that you have been a public school educator,
Mhm.
have you ever seen a time that was putting so much on the plates of teachers by people who are not teachers? In other words, legislators defining how teachers teach.
No, Scott, it's becoming more and more driven, it seems like these days. And I've been teaching 25 plus years, but yes, it's ridiculous.
And it's actually worse than ridiculous because if we look at some of the things that are before us, it's shameful. Democrats believe in three things, many things, but the three basics are: we believe that everybody's entitled to a good, quality, free education. We also
Mhm.
believe that everyone is deserving of quality health care,
Shh.
affordable quality health care, and finally, economic opportunity. Now,
Yes.
if we start to take away and chip away at our values as teachers, as values as Oklahomans about what our kids are learning, um, we are limiting any possible ways for people to advance financially, economically, and obviously this becomes a health issue as well. So there's just all kinds of craziness, and I speak to legislators who are Democrats who are teachers, Melissa Provenzano, John Waldron, and these people are just they're so frustrated with their colleagues because these are people trying to make sense out of something that is nonsensical. Carol, for you as not just a teacher but also an administrator, has what has been the turning point in this kind of legislation where they want to be so strict in mandating what is and what is not talked about in the classroom? Can you point to any one thing that really started to change that?
That's a good question. For me, it was testing. When we initially started testing, it was broader. It wasn't as curriculum strictly driven as it is now. And it has caused many teachers that I know personally are leaving the profession because they're tired of teaching to the test.
Mhm.
It from about mid-April on, there's no teaching going on. And if you're an administrator or a counselor, your job is administering all of the information out to the teachers who are giving the test. You are rounding up citizens to act as proctors for the test. It the testing situation is people in private who are giving these tests to us. They're making a fortune on the backs of students, and that's what's driving our education.
It's really sad because, frankly, I know that teachers are so overworked and they're just so tired of trying to navigate between in-person learning and virtual learning. But Veronica, the exodus of educators from Oklahoma started before COVID. And
Mhm.
certainly part of that has to do with what we pay our teachers here. We don't put a high priority on the very people who are shaping the lives of our children. Are you seeing more and more of your colleagues who are leaving the profession or leaving the state to teach in other places?
Well, I had before the pandemic. I'm not sure today. I'm actually seeing more teachers leaving the profession, period, because this is
Mhm.
very difficult during the pandemic. So you could leave the state, but the pandemic is also in other states.
Sure, it is.
So for the most part, I'm starting to see more retirement
Mhm.
and more teachers deciding to switch into something else because it's pretty dangerous. I mean, that virus has no name. Anyone could get it, and we have to be extremely safe. We have to wear our mask in the district that I am. I'm very proud of our district. I think our district is doing the best they can. Scott, I almost feel like it's damn if we do, damn if we don't.
Mhm.
Because if we don't have the children coming in, it's kind of hard and difficult for some of the kids to virtually get on for whatever reason.
Yes.
Maybe their parents are at work. I don't know. So we actually do prefer that the children come in. We just wish that more families would be more cautious if their child is ill or they know people are ill in their family to please keep their kids home and have them tested because we have grants and we're able to test any child and they do that. Our nurses, they're working in overload.
Hmm. Let me ask you, um, Carol, this one is for you. What are your thoughts around the latest no plan of the governor of just throwing the doors open so that we can have citizen teachers?
Oh, that one was good. When that first came out, those of us who are in administration who work to get substitutes in the classroom knew that the background check, that is not a day process. That is, we've waited 3 and 4 weeks at a time to get a background check on people. There is a cost to the background check. It is not free. I believe it's up to 35, maybe $50 now, and I have been in schools where teachers put in money to pay for some of our parents to get that background check because they didn't have the money to get it, but we needed them as subs. We knew these parents, and they had to wait a month, sometimes 6 weeks before they got their first check after subbing. So, I mean, that right there, it just doesn't make sense. The governor kept talking about we want our kids in classrooms learning. Everybody agreed that is not learning when you just pull someone in. That is babysitting. And babysitting in a class of 30 first graders is dangerous. It's very dangerous. Pre-K, they have to have the most they can have is 20 kids, and they have to have a teacher and a teacher's assistant. First grade on up, basically, there are no class size limits anymore. And so, whatever there is, you walk into that classroom. If the teacher's been sick, chances are there aren't any lesson plans, not much to go on. So to just bring anyone into a classroom is dangerous for the kids in that classroom.
Veronica, I know that this is something when you and I chatted last week that this is something that you're very passionate about as well. When we saw the photographs of the more police officers, three of them standing in the classroom as if they were guarding the children, with their
Yes.
hands on their hips and the whole nine. What what if you could say to the governor this thing? What would that thing be?
If I could tell the governor something, I would let him know that, I was a first grade teacher for 12 years. First grade is, just as Carol said, it's very difficult. You're trying to teach phonics, you're trying to teach comprehension, writing, so much. And I can remember having the community type themes where I would invite officers into the classroom and firefighters because the children were afraid. They really were. They see, this wonderful citizen with the gun, but they don't know how to take that. You don't know what experiences these children have had from home. They may have had not such a good experience. And we want them to know that the police officers are safe people, to work with. But I'm not sure the classroom is the place. Like I said, not only are we going to school to get certified in areas, but it takes years of other types of training in order to teach in these classrooms. When I went to school, it was a very good school, and I can remember doing my student teaching, even I had fear on how I was able to teach these children how to read. And it was my mentor teacher who taught me how to teach the decoding and those skills to make me a good teacher today. I think I'm pretty good at teaching children how to read today, but I couldn't just could not walk in a classroom and just do it, just even with my degree. It takes a lot of training.
You mentioned education and training. We should point out to our viewers that that's not something that just ends when you graduate.
Exactly.
It's lifelong learning for educators.
Yes.
Carol, one of the big things that we're hearing from lawmakers is we need more parental control over what our kids are being taught. Now, I know for a fact that teachers beg parents to come for parent-teacher conferences. I know that they beg parents to become involved in their kids' homework. And so if they're not involved on that level, how can we expect parents to be making the right decisions about what goes on in the classroom?
We can't unless again, as educators, we have that training in this is the long range plan. This is where we want our this is what we want our high school seniors to know. And so from there back, we start that planning. In the elementary, we're not subject oriented as much as we are learning oriented, learning how to read, learning how to do math. About 5th and 6th grade, we start hitting world history, geography, some things like that. Now, does that mean it's not covered in the lower grades? No. We do science, but science isn't like science is in 7th grade or 5th or 6th grade. We cannot expect our parents to look at that whole range of what learning we want our kids to do, what we want them to learn, and understand this is just a little brick in a piece of a huge wall that we're building. It's hard for teachers. Curriculum, you can go online and the State Department has curriculum. It's hard for teachers to break that down. Okay, we want to do this the first 9 weeks. These are the concepts we want to get. And then they have to break it down into smaller chunks and smaller chunks. It's an ongoing planning, redoing process.
And yet, Veronica, having heard that, we now have pending legislation that says that if a parent finds a book in the school library or anywhere on the school property that they don't think is appropriate, and this is regarding gender orientation, sexual identity, gender identity, that one parent, that's all it takes, one parent can demand that book be pulled from the shelf. If it's not pulled in 30 days, the librarian or teacher or whoever is in possession of that book is fined $10,000 a day. They are terminated and they can't apply for a job in any school in the state for 2 years.
Wow.
Okay. This is yes.
Scott, I'm sorry, but that's extremely frightening for me.
Mhm.
especially being an African American. Here we have Black history coming up, and it's a lot of rich books that are in Black history. And as an ESL teacher, even before I was an ESL teacher, I love to dress up in my African heritage culture. And I would dress up and would go in and go into several classrooms and love to read to the children. I have a
Hmm.
big rain stick, bringing the rains to Capita Plains, and I'll dress up. I would love doing that and acting it out. But honestly, I actually read a book. I think it was last month. I considered reading this book, and it was rich. It was a scholastic book, and I said, you know what? I'm too afraid to read this because I don't know how people would perceive it. So, although it was rich, I'm like, I will have to read it to my grandchildren. But now I'm so afraid of what I can do.
Boy, that brings up the what you said before: damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's a hard place for an educator to be. Um, Carol, there is this is not directly tied to education, but there's a tangent here, and one lawmaker has proposed that the Bible be made the state book of Oklahoma, which is which is I'm going to leave that one right there. But the other one requires, now this to me is unbelievable. Requires that every school has at least one copy of the King James translation of the Bible. Nothing more modern than the King James. And it also must be used in teaching electives like religion or Hebrew. Now, I'm not smart enough to figure out how you use an English translation of a book to teach another language, especially Hebrew. That's I don't understand that. And if I can't understand that, we wind up with teachers like Veronica who say, hold on, wait, I'm going to get in trouble here
Mhm.
if I move this way or that way. So at what point are teachers so stifled, Carol, that there's just nowhere else to go?
The teaching with that, with the Bible would be more like a literate. Some schools have a literature class based on the Bible,
Mhm.
but they don't use the King James version. That's like trying to read Shakespeare without all the little footnotes on the side that tell you what those words meant back in that time. All of that information, uh, how to do that. Um, and when people bring up doing that, there's always a lot of religion talk in education that we should teach um, Christianity or God. And my question always is, who's God and which God?
I one of my least favorite things to hear is, well, this all started when they took God out of schools.
Yes.
It's like if your God is little enough to put in your pocket and take outside the school, then hey, more power to you. But that's a refrain that has been going on for at least the last 40 years, and it seems like we're hard pressed to move beyond that. But
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
we've always had kids in our room who are Latter-day Saints, um, children who can't by their religion pledged allegiance to a flag. We've had those kids, and we've always been open-minded enough that we work with them. We make sure the other students understand why they don't say the pledge. It, if we go back to total Christianity is the only thing in the schools, we are a much more diverse population than we were even back in the 80s.
Mhm.
And so, how are those kids going to fit into that school model?
And that obviously that's a huge issue, because we're setting the kids up to be ostracized,
Mhm.
and we're not taking into account anything other than what seems right to a politician. This is, I want to talk to both of you for a few minutes because this is such an important issue. There is a bill that would prohibit social and emotional learning. But look at this definition: it's the process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. I want that. I
Exactly.
want that. I mean, okay, how in the world do you teach a drama class but you can't talk about feelings?
Right.
How in the world can you coach football without talking about ways to mitigate conflict? And so there again, this is notice that they put the made this an acronym SEL, because that way we can hide it and make it just this obscure thing. But all of a sudden, we can't talk about that. Now, Veronica, to your point, um, we can't, according to one piece of legislation, we can't talk about how one group of people in our country were enslaved more than
Right.
others because the legislator says, well, everyone was enslaved at some point. And I'm like, you know, that's not true. And so, but we don't want to hurt the feelings of white kids. But now we're trying to pass legislation that doesn't allow us to talk about our feelings. Now, 24% of school age kids in the state of Oklahoma, 24% will go to bed hungry tonight.
Mhm.
Mhm.
What are they
Unfortunately.
supposed to do with those feelings if they can't talk about them at school? And I mean, where are we going here with this kind of radicalization of education?
Scott, I feel that that is called negative reciprocity. I
Mm,
really do.
I like that.
Because reciprocity is when we give back the golden rule. And what they're doing is stifling us. And as we try to give, what are they doing to give back to help with educators? When you have negative reciprocity like this, it ends up not so well.
no,
So we really need to put more positive vibes. Like I said, here we got Black history coming up, and slavery is part of Black history.
it
And when
certainly
I'm
is.
talking to the children, I explain to them not just the slavery, but also what happened with Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King,
Mhm.
Gandhi. We do comparison and contrasting. I mean, it is, and the kids are so interested in that.
Mm.
And I try to explain this because history is so important. If they don't know it, it'll repeat itself. We don't want that happening. But I also explain to the children just because a few people felt that way, not everyone did that. We had a lot of people that helped us why we're here today.
Yeah. Oh boy, we are sadly just about out of time, but this has been such a great discussion, and you both have wonderful perspectives. I'm going to ask that you consider once we get into this session and things really start to boil. I hope that you'll want to come back and visit with us further
Yeah.
because you have both served to educate me tonight, and frankly made me more than a little bit angry. But I honestly I think that's what we all need to be right now, is angry at this kind of
Mhm.
foolishness that is literally jeopardizing the future of our kids. Well, Veronica, thank you so much. Thank you for the work you do every day. It's a pleasure talking with you this evening.
Thank
And
you,
Carol,
Scott.
I will. Before I let you go, Carol, I'm going to ask you to just do a pitch on how you spend your Mondays.
Oh, I was lucky enough to call the the state DIM headquarters and say, I've got some free time. I'm retired. How can you use me? And so I'm at the Oklahoma DIMS on Mondays from 9 to 3:30ish, helping with anything that I can do.
And it's a pleasure having you in the office, and it's been a pleasure visiting with you this evening. Carol, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow. What can I say? We are up against it. This is going to be, it's going to be a very challenging legislative session for Democratic legislators, for parents, for teachers, and certainly most of all for school children. We owe it to our kids and their futures to pay attention, to pick up the phone, to make ourselves known, and to not allow a handful of people to decide how and what our kids will learn. That's never worked well in this country when a minority decides what's best for the majority. Well, friends, we are completely out of time tonight. I hope that you have learned something this evening. I know that I certainly have. And I'm just very grateful for the time that you spend with us here on Monday evening. And I appreciate all of you who share this broadcast, because that way, together, we are helping to make a difference by letting people know what is out there that we all have to be concerned about. I hope that you'll tune in again next Monday evening at 6:30. Until then, I'm Scott J. Hamilton, thanking you for joining us on behalf of everyone here at the Oklahoma Democratic Party. Good night.